Hello, everyone. Happy Veterans Day, and thank you for joining us on our webinar Wednesday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steven, and I'm the marketing manager here at Acumen. And today we have James and Ray from Prophix. In this webinar, we'll be giving you a brief overview on the budgeting and planning solution and showcase how Sage users can prepare to navigate 2021. Whether you have Sage 300 or Sage Intacct, Prophix software is a very robust system that can automate mundane processes, provide tools to pivot plans in real time, and enable you to go into next year with a world-class financial planning capability. Today's webinar will be in listen-only mode, but please feel free to write your questions in the chat option and we'll answer them near the end of the presentation. We have a lot to cover in 1 hour, so I will now pass it on to James and Ray.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time to watch this webinar today. I appreciate, how busy everybody is and appreciate you taking the time to learn more about Prophix. So, yeah, exactly as Stephen has suggested, we're going to spend today really, introducing you to Prophix and talk about how we can help you build a world-class planning solution fit for 2021. I guess, in terms of kind of a bit of an overview of us, just to kick off with, I don't know how many of you may have heard of Prophix or not, but we're a corporate performance management specialist. We're a leader in the mid-market, specializing in everything that you can kind of see on this screen. And I'll go into a little bit of depth in a moment as to what each of these kind of components cover. But really, it's all about things like budgeting and planning, all the way up to kind of the detail around financial consolidation and close and everything in between. I'll start with some introductions. Just to myself, I'm James Hanson. I manage our global partnership with Sage. So whilst you might hear from my accent, I'm based out of the UK in England, but I'm in a global role. I sit on our exec team at Prophix. We're a Canadian headquartered business. And as I say, I manage the global relationship with Sage. I'm also really pleased to be joined today by my colleague, Ray Warney. Ray works really closely with me in the dedicated Sage team at Prophix, and he'll be showing you a very high level demo of Prophix and giving you a flavor as to what we can do from a product perspective. Ray was also a former implementation consultant at Prophix, so he'll also be able to talk to you about if you've got any questions around the implementation process and the ease of use of Prophix itself, which is really, I guess, what we're going to be focusing most of our time today on. We really want to show you the art of the possible, if you like, with a CPM solution like Prophix, and how it can not only help you navigate and manage the business through the uncertain times that we've all found ourselves in this year, but also how it can truly transform the way your organizations conduct financial planning and analysis in normal times too. Our entire mission is to fundamentally transform the way FP&A is conducted across every organization. So today we're going to spend a lot of time showing you kind of what that means in reality, and hopefully you'll all get a picture as to kind of how it might be able to help your business. I'm also conscious maybe you're less familiar with Prophix, so we'll also give you a quick overview as to our business and give you a bit of context as to who we are, what we do, and how long we've been doing it for, to give you some comfort around our experience in this whole world. As I mentioned, we'll then kind of dive into the demo. You can see on the slide here, there's a number of areas we'll be looking at. We'll start with a bit of an overview of the platform, a bit of an orientation around our dashboarding and our dynamic reporting capability. We'll then get into some workflowing around the budgeting and forecasting process, and how that can not only be used for B&F, but also for any financial or operational planning process. And then we'll get into some detail around things like headcount planning and cash flow, and then a finish up at the end with some scenario planning, which I'm sure many of you have been doing a lot this year, as well as kind of the automation of performance reporting. So a bit about us. We've been in the market for a long time, over 30 years, in fact. So we actually know pretty much everything there really is to know about CPM, and we've seen pretty much everything there is to see really around planning. We're a Canadian business, as I mentioned. We're headquartered out of Toronto, but we've got offices internationally in the US, in Europe, the UK, Australasia, and South Africa. And we really truly are a global business. We've got over 3,500 customers in over 100 different countries. and also in every vertical that you can imagine, from manufacturing, retail, food and beverage, to travel, hospitality, and not-for-profits and technology services business, because of course every organization really has to plan. I think one of the key things about what we do is that Prophix is all about bringing this capability to this SMB or the mid-market sector. Historically, CPM has been the domain of the big enterprises with, you know, big, expensive Oracle and SAP-like systems that can be a beast to manage. You know, Prophix is all about making it accessible to the mid-market, both in terms of the pricing and but also in terms of the ease of use and our implementation methodology that really gives full ownership of the system to the end users. So there's no requirement to keep coming back to IT to kind of change reports or make any adjustments. Finance and the end user teams will own the system and be able to do all of that administration themselves. And then the final thing to point out is we're cloud-based. So there's no technology to manage, hosted in Amazon Web Services with all of the strength and capability that brings and resilience around security. But it means you have no kind of requirement to go and build your own servers, maintain the software, or do all the patch management that is associated when you own technology. All of that is taken care of by Prophix. And you're also always on the very latest version, so no requirement for upgrades. As I mentioned, you know, here's a kind of, I guess, the obligatory slide with a kind of cross-section of our customers. As I mentioned, we've got 3,500 in pretty much every vertical sector. The one thing that unites them all is that we are, you know, they're all mid-market organizations like yourselves. I think what I do want to just spike out briefly is the partnership and why that's so important. We're a global strategic partner with Sage, and we are really very deeply integrated with Sage, with a certified integration for both Sage Intacct and Sage 300. We have many Sage 300 and Sage Intacct customers, but also in other platforms, whether it's CRE 500 or X3. Our depth and breadth of the partnership with Sage really does extend quite some way. We have regular meetings with the C-suite at Sage, sharing roadmaps and technology vision. So it really does mean that, you know, when you're working with both Sage, Acumen and Prophix, that you've got one unified team behind you. Your ERP that effectively runs your business and the CPM platform that would manage your business, strategically integrated with partners that know and trust each other well, which I think is really important when you're buying any form of technology. And I'm really thrilled to say that last week as well, we were awarded the 2020 Sage ISV Innovation Partner of the Year Award, which, you know, we're incredibly proud of, and I think also speaks to not only the kind of depth of that relationship, but also what we really bring to the Sage community in the innovation. And if you think back to the statement I made around kind of fundamentally changing FP&A, of course, you can only do that if you're bringing innovative technology to bear. And that was what was so satisfying, that this was awarded because of the innovation that we bring, the automation that we bring that Stephen alluded to earlier, but also some of the things we're doing around machine learning and AI, which is, you know, incredibly important to us, and I think will be incredibly important to our customers. Okay, so that's a bit of background about us and our partnership with obviously Sage and with Acumen. I'm going to move on a little bit now and I guess get into what we see happening in the Office of Finance. And again, I know I'm probably preaching to the choir because you'll probably all see this every day. And, you know, as I mentioned, by working with so many customers, you know, we really do get to see what they're wrestling with on a daily basis as they evolve their finance functions to meet the changing needs of the organizations that they support. And to be fair, before we even talk about the unique world that we find ourselves in right now with the global pandemic, you know, I think finance teams and CFOs were already wrestling with huge change in their organizations and much more, you know, new demands from the businesses that they support. You know, I don't need to sit here and say there are pressures on profitability. I think if you look at the kind of aggressive rate of change in pretty much every competitive landscape, you know, it's very harder than ever in many ways to differentiate and find uncharted territory. Technology and improvements in global logistics have reduced the barrier to entry in almost all markets. And you're facing competition today that you had no idea even existed yesterday. I think the other key as well is that the data challenge, data is everywhere and moving at a speed that is really unimaginable and influencing markets at incredibly, at light speed. You only need to really see it, look at the kind of huge swings that are happening in the finance markets right now. Every time there's a change in political leadership, or a business influencer makes a statement about COVID, the volatility that finance teams were wrestling with, as I say, was already astronomical. And of course, I think organizations are actually turning to finance more and more to really navigate a path to growth and success. And in fact, at Prophix, we really believe that there's never been a better time to be actually in the Office of Finance, for it to be the home of data analytics across the whole business and to be the cornerstone for insight and future decision making. And that is exactly what Prophix is designed to enable with your businesses. We think finance people have great analytical skills. They can think in multi-threaded ways. So I think it's absolutely the opportunity there for finance to take a more strategic role in the organizations that they support. But the reality is they can only do that if they truly unburden themselves of the mundane activities that they often face and the manual kind of activity that tends to happen in an Office of Finance. And only, again, if they have the tools at hand to truly automate those processes and to truly be able to then manage the day-to-day business. And I think ultimately it's all about delivering this. I think this is what finance, or what the business, I should say, now expects of finance, to really deliver the perfect marriage of these three things. Hindsight, where perhaps finance was always comfortable telling us what happened, and perhaps why, with a bit of insight in terms of what had happened. But I think it's the foresight piece that I think many organizations are now really expecting finance to play a bigger role in, having the time to do the business partnering, having the time to do the detailed analysis of data as opposed to just collating and reporting on it, having the ability to pull scenario plans together and kind of take a proactive role in sort of driving decision making. And that's the promise that we make to all of our customers, to enable them to do that. And particularly when you think about what's happened this year, I'm sure many of you can probably think back to perhaps maybe the end of 2019, where you were building your plans for 2020, you were distributing templates and working with your teams around your organization to bring the latest budgets together and the latest forecasts, and bringing it all together into one financial plan and operation plan for the coming year. Oftentimes that can take many weeks and months even to really pull together, particularly when you're stuck in spreadsheets. And I think organizations now, if you think what happened to those plans in about the February or March timescale, is effectively you pretty much had to rip them up and create new ones. And some organizations, were lucky enough to see unforeseen demand in new areas. Others, were having to kind of perhaps, retrench in certain areas and perhaps reduce costs in order to kind of maintain, liquidity. All of those sort of scenarios every organization was really facing. And I think the leaders of businesses were turning to finance to develop best plans, average and worst case scenarios. And what if this situation continues for 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months? Can we model cash flow in a more granular way? What about kind of where we're growing? And can you tell us what customers are more profitable than others? These are all the sorts of questions that I think finance have been tasked with over the last little while. And for most companies, they're trying to do this in massive spreadsheets, pivot tables on steroids, wrestling with formulas and broken links, the endless kind of manual reconciliation of data, and the worrying about what you're presenting. And actually, is this accurate? Is this the real source of the truth? And these are the things where I think CPM tools like Prophix can really help and bring agility and automation to that whole planning and reporting process, to really give finance both the tools and the time to deliver that blend of hindsight, insight, and foresight that I showed a moment ago. So that's, I guess, a little bit about us, the company, and our mission statement and our commitment to you. I'm going to switch gears into the product now, and just while Ray readies himself with our demo, to give you some cornerstone, if you like, around the product. You'll see, obviously, in our product, we kind of break it down into these 5 areas: budgeting and planning, the classic use case. So typically that might be revenue planning, OPEX planning, but it can be any sort of planning you're doing across the business: HR planning, marketing planning, inventory planning, demand planning, anywhere where you're collaborating with around numbers in your business, where there might be spreadsheets being flying around the company. Prophix can really help and be used in any of those scenarios. Reporting and analytics. Prophix is a really strong reporting engine. Anything from your sort of board packs or your exec packs, your monthly P&Ls, your income statements and your balance sheets, your cash flow forecasts can all be built and automated and filtered for security within Prophix. And then, of course, financial consolidation and close. And obviously, I don't know how many of your organizations might have a multi-entity structure or shared ownership where you're having to do allocations. That's a real strength of Prophix. We have one of the strongest consolidation capabilities in the mid-market. So again, not something we're going to get into the depths of today, but if you do have any challenges around consolidations, then definitely speak to us. We can certainly help. And then the other area really is around workflow and automation, and this wraps around the whole platform. And this is I guess the short-term ROI of Prophix, the ability to build a workflow and a process for any financial and a visual process for any financial and operational planning task in a drag and drop manner, from effectively bringing in the actuals to inform an initial budget, to the dissemination of top-down, bottom-up, zero-based budget templates across the team, to automated reminders, to the automated aggregation of that data complete with approval and rejection cycles. It really does save so much time for finance, and gives real transparency into any of those cycles for the CFO and for the finance leaders. Something we'll show you, as I say, when we get to the presentation. And then the final piece I've already talked about, which is the virtual financial analyst and our work with AI and machine learning. But we are the first to market with AI capability in the product today, as it relates to automated analysis of chart and report data, as it relates to natural language interaction, the ability to ask questions of Prophix, even in a Siri and Alexa style way, using natural language to surface information, to make it even easier for non-finance users to get value out of the data. So again, just Ray, I think if I'll be handing over to you at the end of this slide, but just to give you the infrastructure background on Prophix, this is how the product breaks down. So you can see on the left-hand side, we have all of the different source systems. Prophix is effectively a platform where you'll bring in different data from different source systems. It could be obviously Sage from an ERP perspective. You might have multiple entities where they could be running different ERPs that you also want to bring in and aggregate and consolidate into one planning source of the truth within Prophix. But typically we'll also bring in CRM data to inform forecasts, obviously data from your payroll or HR systems to inform headcount planning. It might be purchasing or manufacturing systems. Any structured data source, we can automate and bring in the data into Prophix to enable you to build a whole series of interconnected models. So we'll build core finance models, revenue planning models, budgets and forecasts, but the key being that these are all interconnected cubes where you're budgeting and planning and reporting from the same set of data, all with the governance and control that Prophix brings. So no worries about version control or anything like that. You're always planning and reporting from the same source of truth. And of course, a whole bunch of tools in the product that we'll show you in a moment that enables all of that. And then of course, the output into your standard Office capabilities. So you can output into any of the Office 365 products, PowerPoint. We have dynamic reporting, so you can even drill down in a PowerPoint back to source data. Our Excel integration is really strong, and obviously into Word and PDF. So that's the product. I think let's switch gears. I'm going to stop sharing now, Ray, and hand over the reins to you.
Perfect. Okay then. Thank you for the introduction, James. Honestly, that was great. It was great insight into the problems the Office of Finance faces as it relates to really gaining insight, granular insight into your company's performance, as well as planning forward. Essentially, what does next year look like, and how can we be better prepared for what's to come? And planning is really an umbrella term that covers, your annual budget, forecasting, rolling forecasts, production planning, etc. And so what you have in Prophix really is a structured modeled solution with pre-configured planning functionality layered into it to enable the Office of Finance to plan with more agility, right? So creating what-if scenarios on the fly, for example. And as we walk through the solution, I hope you, as the audience, will keep the 4 core pillars of the solution in mind. So one of James's last slides with kind of describing what we do as a solution. So that's reporting, planning, consolidations, and workflow, because that's exactly what the demo is going to show you, starting off with reporting and analytics. So with that in mind, we'll be walking through the solution at this point in time that you can now see my screen. So Prophix is a web-based, cloud-based solution. As you see, I've opened up a Google Chrome window. And logged into my Prophix environment here. Prophix supports single sign-on, so you can pass through your Windows authenticated credentials to log into Prophix as well. Prophix welcomes you into the system, displaying your own personalized dashboards. So this is your KPIs metrics that are important to you as an end user and as an end user. So that may be whether you are a controller in the Office of Finance, a CFO just consuming data, a salesperson entering in data into their budget, whatever the case may be, the system welcomes you in to the same way. These dashboards are interactive in nature, and you can, as mentioned, you can kind of personalize them, the metrics, the KPIs that are shown based on each individual user. But even if you assign this exact same dashboard to multiple users, let's take this breakdown by region tile into consideration over here. So this is a breakdown of our revenues by region. And let's say you have various or multiple territory managers, one for the West, one for the Midwest, one for the Southeast, etc. With security blanketing the entire system, each user is going to see a different kind of version of this dashboard in itself. So if I'm the manager of the West region, I only have access to that particular data set. As I hover over that region, I can see the particular figure, but what I would see as an end user would be my own regional breakdown. So these 4 customers roll up into my West region, giving me this breakdown. So security is blanketing the entire system, whether it's data that I'm viewing on a dashboard or a report, as well as from a data entry perspective as well. And that's one way in which these dashboards are interactive. As you can see, there are a host of tiles that we can actually embed within our dashboard itself, and you can have multiple dashboards. Over here, I have a tile that are identifying my favorite documents, reports, dashboards, processes, report binders, etc. So you can create different various dashboards as well. If I click on the CFO dashboard over here, for example, I may want to get a better idea of my overall company's health or profitability, as we can see here, right? A bar graph showing profitability, revenue broken down by product group, top 10 customers, so on and so forth. And this is all modeled off the data that exists within your current source system, being Sage 300 or Sage Intacct. And further to that point, Prophix can really be that central hub or depository for all of your data modeling, right? So we can connect to Sage 300, Sage Intacct, any other data source systems as well. That could be a CRM that we need to model sales data off of, or HR data from an HRMS system as well. So Prophix can be that central hub for all of your data and the resulting analysis that you need to perform on it. So one thing that I did a little earlier was double click into this hierarchy, getting a breakdown of regions down to the individual customers. And that's one way in which these dashboards are interactive. So looking at this revenue variance tile over here, I'm looking at a revenue variance broken down by quarter, actuals to budget variance. I can double click into quarter 3, getting a monthly breakdown. And once again, you can get as granular as you want with this modeled approach. So if I want to get a weekly or a daily breakdown of my sales as it relates to my business or whatever is important to my business, we can build those models accordingly. And one thing to just keep in note as we walk through this demo is the fact that everything that you guys see in this demo environment right now is just that. The way that our implementations really work is that they start off with a discovery session of Prophix really understanding your requirements as it relates to reporting and planning and building those models, these dashboards, these reports as per those needs. A second way in which these dashboards are interactive would be so everything that we see in Prophix right now, all this data is GL level summarized data, but you also have the ability to tap back into the underlying transactions. And once again, whether it's from a dashboard or a report. So with a very simple right click, we can hit this transactions table and this will pop up. And this is once again, the transactions that aggregate up to my revenue GL account that we're seeing on the dashboard itself or on the tile itself. And these columns are once again pulled directly from your source system, and we have access to them directly from here. So we can go from GL level summarized data down to the transactions and even down to an invoice. So for example, if you're scanning invoices into your system, into your ERP, we can actually link that into Prophix and have it being made available to you directly as a link from within Prophix. So you can go from GL to transaction to the actual invoice. And what that's speaking to is basically the immediate access you should have to granular level information right at your fingertips. A visual representation of this data is great, but you always want a report actually backing up the data that you're analyzing. So once again, with a simple right click, you can hit on this link template button over here. And we're going to be taken to a report showing us a report version of the data visualization we were just looking at. So once again, we're looking at revenues broken down by region, actuals to budget variance. And as you can see, we can embed various types of notes and comments to explain some of those variances. So we have a large positive variance in the West region. Why is that the case? New customers acquired through partners. And so that can be data entered in and tied back to exactly this combination of my westerly region, West region in Q3 across all channels of customers as it relates to my variance. You can also embed individual comments into individual cells as well. In Prophix, we have this concept of pages, which essentially act as filters. So if I hit this drop-down menu over here in time, I can see that this report in particular is constructed with my time hierarchy with quarters rolling up to my year. And as I filter through these various options of quarters or by channels of customers as well, so I can take a look at this as a list or a hierarchy view. I like the hierarchy view personally. So I can take a look at my total channels and then have it broken down by my distributors, my private label, my retail, so on and so forth. And as you guys can see, my report and my graph automatically update as I filter through these various options. And a little bit to differentiate from how most departments, most finance departments are currently reporting and planning. Everything is being done in Excel, really, right? That's the tool that most companies are comfortable with and used to. So in Excel terms, what we're looking at really is this report, this Prophix generated report, which would equate to about 25 worksheets in an Excel workbook. And kind of proof of that would be if I were to download this report into Excel, I can see every combination between time and my channels available to me to download into Excel. And as you can see that we would have 25 different combinations all compressed into one Prophix generated report here. And so once again, with security blanketing the entire system, let's say I only have security access to the distributor channel. If I were that particular user, this would be the only combination that I would see along with all my options in time. And this level of analysis is great as well. So essentially we've gone from a dashboard, we can tap into the underlying transactions, both from the dashboard as well as from any given report, as you can see here. But there's another level or layer that we can take it to. And the application from which you can do that is called ad hoc analysis. And so once again, with a very simple right click, as you guys can see, everything is mouse driven here. There's no keyboard intervention necessary. You can very easily right click, hit analyze, and we'll be taken to, as mentioned, our application called ad hoc analysis. And what we like to at least call this internally is it's almost like a pivot table on steroids, and we'll see why that's the case in just a moment. But what you'll notice is that this report essentially that we're looking at right now is the exact same report we were looking at a little bit earlier, stripped away of all of its formatting, and we don't see a graph either. But the advantages that you get from this platform over here, from ad hoc analysis, is really the ability to slice and dice your data. We could filter between various page members and options in our report. But from here, what we can do is, let's say we're really trying to get an understanding of why this 21% variance exists in our westerly region, which is really contributing heavily towards our 7% variance across our total regions. So I can very easily expand this, and I can get insight into the individual customers rolling up to the west. And as I get that breakdown, I can see that, okay, that 21% variance is mainly driven by the fact that we have this customer, Artscape, that is seemingly making decent, good revenues in Q3 over here, but we didn't necessarily budget for them for whatever reason. And this may be a situation in which your drill across would come in handy. As I right click and hit drill across, what I can see over here is that Artscape's been a customer since April 10th of 2020, which makes sense as to why we didn't budget for them at the end of 2019 for our annual 2020 budget, which gives more credence to why we should be forecasting as well. Further to this point, the reason that we really call ad hoc analysis a pivot table on steroids is, as I expand out my pages once again, I can see the various dimensions that I am trying to analyze my revenues by. So if I wanted to get a regional breakdown by product instead for my actual data, I can very easily do that. All I have to do is take my products, drag and drop them under my actual bucket in my columns, and I pivoted my data. And ad hoc analysis basically gives you the ability to explore your data in infinite ways, right? All characterized by these dimensions that you've included within your model. So once again, so if I want to look at regions over time instead, once again, very easily able to do so. Now I want to look at my budget instead, or my actuals. Now I want to get my actuals to budget variance, so on and so forth. So I can, once again, just very easily pivot all of my data using this easy drag and drop type of technology. And what this really means is that you can empower your end users. You don't need to be a technical person to know and learn how to use this. It's all right click, hit analyze, drag and drop. So you can have a salesperson, an HR person, a department manager, people who aren't necessarily technical in nature, to be empowered with their own data, as long as security is once again blanketing the entire system, which it is. And so with all of your users enabled and empowered, that takes a heavy burden off of the Office of Finance to provide various types of reports and analysis into that data. You should be empowered yourself, because all you're doing once again is dragging and dropping, expanding and collapsing. And I took a few minutes to really talk about our reporting and analysis capabilities in the software, but I'm going to be pivoting the conversation now over to planning, which is really the bread and butter of our solution. But it's important to start off with reporting and analytics because you need to see how you're tracking against plan, right? Your budget alone is fine. Your actuals alone are fine as well. But marrying those two data sets and analyzing, getting granularity into your variance and the reasons why is real power, right? And once again, all in a centralized, unified platform. Actuals, budget, variance, transactions as well, down to the invoice level, all within one platform, all accessible to you immediately at your fingertips. So to really start talking about planning, as James mentioned a little earlier, I have a consulting background at Prophix, and once we started talking about planning, doing a discovery session around, well, how do you plan for your operating expenses? How do you plan for your revenues by customer, by product, so on and so forth? How do you do any sort of cash planning, etc.? It kind of starts off with describing how the flow of your budgeting process in itself. So I'm going to use our workflow and automation capabilities as a segue into planning itself. So I've opened this workflow called Prophix Workflow, which kind of gives us a good example of what a budgeting cycle really looks like. And this can be leveraged and repurposed for a forecast, because at the end of the day, once again, all we're really talking about is some sort of planning. But as maybe this is a neater view, we're looking at a list view of all the various tasks that are involved in a planning cycle. Let me go to a flow chart. And yes, it's very messy over here, but hopefully what Prophix will let you do or enable you to do is really organize yourself, right, in a structured manner. So as you can see, once again, from this visualization is that our workflow is composed of various tasks that you can create from within the system. Within each task, whether it's revenue planning, OpEx planning, production planning, global sales approval, so on and so forth, there are four main variables that you're identifying in each of these tasks as you're initially setting them up. Those four variables are: number one, the start date of the task; number two, the end date of the task. So when is your revenue plan due, for example? Third, who is the owner of the task? So who's responsible for completing my OpEx planning, right? Or how many people and which people are responsible for completing it? Typically department managers, for example. And then fourth, who is the approver listed on the task? And the way that it plays out in real life is, I'll describe that process very shortly as we actually get into some of the planning templates. But at a high level, let's take revenue planning into consideration. Based on the start date of the task that you've identified, an email is going to be kicked out to the owner of the task, the person responsible for completing it. They're going to receive an email in their Outlook inbox saying that your revenue planning task is due by so-and-so date, the end date that you've identified, and a link will be embedded within that email as well. You click on that link, you're going to be taken to your planning template in Prophix. You complete your data entry or however you're planning, and from that point on out, you can submit your plan, which then bounces an email to the approver responsible for approving, rejecting, or making their own edits to that budgeting template. And the cycle just moves forward and continues on. So once everything is really set up, all you're doing is going from a state of prepare to active to kick off the cycle, and everything manages itself from that point on out. I hope that gives a little bit of clarity into how our workflow is really works and plays out in real life, because it's a huge part of the value that you're trying to realize in purchasing a software like Prophix. The reporting and planning on its own, of course, are great solutions, but really, where are the time savings coming from? The time saving is coming from automating those cycles. So not having to do everything over email and huddled meeting rooms, but having a solution that can really plan out each step of the process, have it being organized, and managing itself really. Planning. We've got about 20 minutes left, and I'm cognizant of the fact that I'd like to keep a couple minutes at the end for a few questions. So we'll run through this relatively quickly, but as I mentioned, planning covers a host of of types of planning. But at the end of the day, you've got three main financial statements: your balance sheet, your cash flow, and your P&L. And most companies are concerned with P&L planning, and the goal being to achieve or construct a consolidated budgeted P&L, right? And that can be broken down into, most P&Ls look relatively the same: your revenues, your cost of revenues, and your expenses. And you can break that down further. And how you actually plan for each part of your P&L or each account within your P&L is obviously going to differ, but I can assure you through the functionality that I'm about to demo as well, is that Prophix can accommodate any type of planning that your company currently does. I'm going to start off with our OpEx planning over here. Let's take a moment to orient ourselves. So I'm looking at an operating expense budgeting template. As we can see here, we've got planning months January through to December, rolling up to our total. We may be planning a year in advance into 2022, and we've got 2 reference points of our prior actuals and a 9+3, or our last 9+3 forecast over here in our last column. But once again, everything that we see in this demo environment is just that. It's just a demo environment, and we can construct these templates through the implementation based on your exact requirements. Over in our pages over here, we've got our various marketing departments: product, content, and field, rolling up to our total marketing. And we've also got, we're also planning for our baseline budget, a scenario A, and then we're also calculating the variance between our budget and scenario A. So you can construct multiple what-if scenarios if need be as well. And what this is pointing to is the ability to embed multiple departments within the same planning template. You distribute it to all of your department managers, one for product, one for content, one for field. But since security is blanketing the entire system, something that I've said quite often already in this demo here today, is that since security is at play, your product marketing manager is only seeing this combination: product marketing with budget, with scenario A and scenario variance. So that's all they have access to. And for an administrator of the system, someone in the Office of Finance, a controller, for example, that makes your job a whole lot easier as well, because all you're doing is creating one standardized template, distributing it to all of your department managers, as an example, and having security and workflow layer on top of it. Let's get to the budgeting functionality in itself. There are 6 main ways in which we can budget in Prophix, and we'll be able to cover all of them, starting off with the most simple and getting to the complex, or powerful rather. First and foremost, just simple data entry, right? You jump into a particular cell, type in a particular number, and have your totals update immediately. And one thing to note as well over here is the fact that this is a pre-populated budget, maybe of your prior actuals, maybe a 3-year average that we've captured and populated our budget with as a starting point. But Prophix can also support a zero-based budgeting approach as well. So number 1, highlight one cell and plug in a number. The second way would be to adjust this data by a gross amount or by a percentage. So highlight one cell or multiple cells, hit adjust, and let's say I want to increase by 15%. I click OK, my $500 turns into $575. I'm always able to insert notes. As you can see, this is a test note, and this is a test note as well that's been embedded. But you can always right click, hit add comment, and provide the justification that you need for the number that you've entered in, right? And so the natural back and forth between budget contributors and budget approvers can be handled and communicated in Prophix rather than, once again, email, slowing down the process. That would slow down the process. The third way in which you can budget is something that's unique to Prophix, actually. And it's the ability to enter in data at a high level, let's say a total year, as we're seeing here, and have that value being spread down to each individual month based on various factors. So let's say I don't know when I'm going to be incurring my costs for my trade shows next year. Probably not a whole lot, because we're not meeting a lot. Most of these trade shows are done virtually now. but let's say $30,000, so down from the $40,000 I spent last year, I hit $30,000 and enter. And what Prophix asked me to do is it's prompting me or asking me, how would you like to spread that $30,000 back into each individual month? And so this most simplistic option is spread evenly, 30,000 divided by 12 into each month. The second option is a little more interesting, spread based on existing data. And what that really means is capture the seasonality that exists within this form. So for example, I've pre-populated with this with my prior actuals. So capture that seasonality and apply it to the $30,000 that I've just data entered in. And within a few seconds, it's going to take that $30,000 and adjust all the values accordingly. So I'm keeping the seasonality, but adjusting the figure at a top level. And you can get as granular as you really want with this. So if I plug in $35,000, there are a couple more options under Show More. You can essentially target any data point that you're loading into this system to help you build a much more accurate and granular plan. So if I have various operational data that I've loaded into Prophix and I want to be able to spread by units produced, for example, or by headcount, or by FTE, or by square footage utilization, whatever is really pertinent to your business, I'm able to leverage that data and spread the data entered in value accordingly. So let's say I have IT costs, we're buying new laptops for our entire company, for everyone in our company. Me as the IT manager, I'm entering in that figure, and I want to spread that cost down to each department by headcount, because each person consumes one laptop. I'm very easily able to do that through this functionality over here. So it's very powerful and can be used in particular ways based off your business needs. But this is a completely pre-configured calculation here once again. You don't need to be a technical person to know or understand how to use this. All you're doing is identifying the data points. The fourth way in which you can enter or create or construct a budget is at a sub GL level. So we're looking at advertising. That's denoted by a little green or a blue arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of these cells. Let's say I'm planning for my advertising GL account over here, but you may have different streams of advertising that you need to plan for. What we call that in Prophix is line item schedules. So I can hit line item schedules. And as we see over here, I can plan for my web, television, radio, and print streams of advertising. And I still have that exact same functionality, data entering into an individual month, putting in a line item total and being able to spread that back into each individual month, as well as put in notes as justifications. Right, and once again, coming back to the point that whichever way you need to plan for any account within your P&L or otherwise, Prophix can help enable you to do that. The fifth way in which you can plan in Prophix is, once again, at a detail level, but this relates mainly to the two most common use cases, I should say, for this type of planning are personnel planning, so planning for your employee-related costs, your salaries, taxes, and benefits. And the second most common use case is planning for your depreciation costs, your capital expenditures. And we'll explore that functionality in just a moment. But the real idea here is that you don't want to be able to jump into the month of July and say, well, I think I'm going to spend $500,000 on salaries in the month of July. You need to be able to get a little more granular. And as you can see, Prophix prohibits me from doing exactly that. So to plan at a granular level on an employee-to-employee basis, we have an application in the system called DPM, Detailed Planning Manager, that will enable you to plan for your employee-related costs by employee using a very robust calculation or calculating engine that we'll see in just a moment. What we see in this form is all of our employees, any accompanying attributes. So attributes serve as characteristics of the employee, as well as drivers for our resulting calculations of our earnings, benefits, and taxes. So are they an hourly or a salary worker? What is their base salary? What benefits plan have they subscribed to? So on and so forth. And once you've entered in all of that information, the calculations, once set up, will automatically apply. So if as you can see, I've done this quite a few times, but if I need a sixth new hire in my department, we're expanding greatly. Type in new hire 6, and H6. And what I'm presented with over here are all of the attributes, the characteristics, the drivers that I need to plug in. So, I need to hire a new analyst. They're going to be hired in the middle of next year. That's when I'm going to need them. Base salary of $60,000. Retirement match, I'm going to assume that they're single for my benefits plan. For my taxes, I know I'm going to be hiring them in the state of New York. Let's say $60,000 isn't going to get you very far, but hopefully they'll make do. I click OK. As you can see, that new person has been added, but the calculations haven't taken yet. I hit refresh. And in just a moment, what we're going to see are the calculations applied to my 6th new hire. So since I'm hiring them in the middle of the year, their prorated salary is $30,000. And that's their benefits and their payroll taxes. And so after I've done my personnel planning over here, what I really want to do is push all of this granular detailed data back into my aggregated GL account. And so I can hit update. It says my finance model was updated successfully. Great. What does that mean exactly? That means when I return to this planning template over here, I was unable to enter in my employee related costs, but they've now been populated since these models are all integrated into providing you and constructing a consolidated plan. Right. So now things are coming together. We've explored various types in which we can plan in Prophix. I'm going to exit out of my OpEx planning template over here and really explore the last way in which you can budget in or plan in Prophix and using revenue as an example. Revenue is typically going to be a little more complex, and what this is describing over here is really it's a broad manner in which you can plan, and it's basically a driver-based or formula-based solution. So using a very simplistic example for our revenues, we're planning by customer as well as by product, and we're data entering in quantities and average selling prices to result in our product revenues. So if I'm a sales manager responsible for these particular customers, I am planning that we are going to be selling 1,200 units at an average selling price of $130, resulting in my product revenues. Right, and once again, so, and as complex as that formula really gets, Prophix can accommodate by essentially just creating those placeholders or data entry points for each component of that formula, which will serve as drivers for your resulting values as it relates to your product revenue in this situation or scenario. And once you've completed your planning template, as mentioned, as an end user, I can hit workflow, submit, and as I click yes over here in just a moment, what that would do is trigger an email to the approver identified on the task that will, as mentioned, have the ability to approve, reject, or make their own edits to the planning template itself. And we've talked about annual budgets. We've looked at our OpEx planning, our revenue planning, our personnel planning. That was all on for an annual budget. But if we're talking about forecasting, I can open up this OpEx reforecasting template over here, and what this is showing is where this is a 3+9. So we're in early April, constructing our forecast for the remaining 9 months of the year. So our actuals are pre-populated already. They're locked. I cannot make any edits, as you can see there. And I'm planning in my yellow highlighted cells for the remainder of the year. Once again, still have the ability to filter between department. Maybe you have various versions of your forecast as well. So 3+9, a 4+8, so on and so forth would all be, you'd all be able to accomplish that from within the system. Even a rolling forecast, an OpEx rolling forecast, as we see here. Let's say we're always planning 12 months ahead. right? So once again, these cells are locked. January 21, let's say we're in January and we're planning for the 12 months ahead. And let's say we're in February now, I can filter to February or our 2+12 forecast. And as you can see here, now my 2 months of actuals are populated, and Prophix has now created a placeholder for February looking out 12 months ahead to be able to be data entered into. So whatever type of planning it is, revenue, OpEx, personnel, we can look at cash flow planning as well for a second or a minute here as well. This is leveraging DPM, Detailed Planning Manager, to plan for our various receivables and payables. And what is the invoice date on it? Do we need to push that out? How is that going to affect our cash balance? Right? What is the invoice amount? Do we need to extend the terms on it? So on and so forth. So whatever logic we really need to create, the platform will enable you to do so. Resulting hopefully once again in a planned balance sheet, cash flow, P&L. We can explore a few other reports, but at this point in time, I'd really like to open it up for questions, given that we only have 2 or 3 minutes left here today.
Thanks, Ray. So at this time, we'll open up the chat option. So if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to write them in. We did have a few that came in already, so we can go ahead and get started. The first one, it says, is there a limit on how many scenarios you can create for planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thankfully, there is no limit on the number of scenarios that you can create, and it's just a matter of creating that placeholder scenario within the system and then enabling your end users to actually enter them into the system.
Thanks. Another one that came in, it says, do you pay for each individual capability? Is it a modular-based system?
No, that's a great thing about Prophix, that it's an open platform that you have all of this functionality available to you right off the bat when you purchase it. What you'd like to actually implement can come in a phased approach based on the implementation you set out forth. But yeah, whatever you'd like to implement can be done, and your DPM, for example, is not a separate SKU that you need to purchase. It's provided right off the bat.
Thanks. And just with time, I think we'll take 2 more. One that came in says, what do most of your Sage customers start off using Prophix for?
Once again, great question, and I've implemented tens of projects, and it really depends. Like I said, the bread and butter of our technology is planning. It's budgeting, forecasting, rolling forecasts, different types of planning. But sometimes customers have a great pain point around reporting and having validity and faith in their data. So you need a structured, modeled environment to help you with that. So eventually you can then get to planning at some point. So it really depends on kind of where you're at as a company in terms of the evolution of your finance department.
Thanks. And last question says, can we integrate multiple data systems like our CRM and payroll as well?
Yes, for sure. It's something that I mentioned a little earlier as well, but what Prophix is really trying to do, it's not an input system other than from a budgeting perspective, but we can model actuals from your CRM. A lot of sales forecasts are in a CRM. We understand that, and we can connect to it and help bring that data in and help you model it. HR systems, you might have multiple ERPs depending on the size of your company as well. And so Prophix can be that kind of consolidation tool as well if necessary.
Perfect. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for joining us today. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to us at am@acumenfl.com, or you can give us a call at 407-965-2411. Be sure to also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest videos, webinars, and product demos. Thanks again, Prophix, for taking the time to show us your solution, and we look forward to seeing you guys all in the near future.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Stephen, and thanks for everyone for attending, and great job with the demo, Ray. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.